Welcome to a brand new podcast. Ian McLean is a writer and the author of TJ's War. David Blair is an actor and the narrator of the audiobook TJ's War. David and Iain have been listening to their readers and listeners and have decided to turn TJ's War into a movie. And since the story covers the entirety of World War II, the movie will cost at least $50 million. Will David and Iain succeed in their quest? Follow them in this podcast series. We're going to make a $50 million movie.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of We're Going to Make a $50 Million Movie.
Welcome, everybody.
Hello there.
Sincera says it much better than that. So, today, our guest is Quinn Hare. Now, he has been with us for nearly 2 years, a key part of the team. In fact, without Quinn, there is no glue. And Quinn, you're responsible for our social media. Anything that's video or pictures and goes out on any of the different platforms that we've got, it's down to you. And so if you say anything that's at all outrageous and you'd like to have it cut and you don't, then it's your fault. I think there may even be a possibility that Quinn has read the book, TJ's War, and listened to the audiobook even more times than I have, or even possibly than you have, David.
Yeah, there's a very high chance.
And he's certainly been a very resourceful advocate for its distribution.
That's why he's looking,
throughout East Anglia.
That's why he's looking exhausted and... No, I'm kidding. Slightly withdrawn.
Yeah, where were you going with that, David? It drives to remote spots with the wonderful Beth to bring the book to the attention of so-called independent bookshop owners.
Independent bookshop owners that claim to be independent until you start cracking them open
a
little bit.
I think we need to touch on that later in this episode.
Absolutely.
Just the word independent drives me nuts with those guys. Quinn's the youngest member of our team, but he is still not without some great life experiences, as I hope you'll discover. Not least being a stint spent in Japan, and hopefully we'll cover that too. And he, like myself, is a computer science graduate, so Quinn, we must be careful not to go down that techie rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
Or I think David will kill us. Start us off. Tell us where you're broadcasting from.
So I am in south of Norfolk, basically in the middle of a field. I say rural is probably the kind of the definition of where I am. I think there's about 3 houses down my road, and I think my neighbours are cows. So it's basically, as rural as you can get. But I kind of moved here a few years ago and have kind of loved it. It's a bit of a change of pace from where I was before, and it's just one of those kind of things where you've got a really kind of lovely atmosphere around you to then spend all of your time in front of a computer or driving around it, and basically not being able to stop and actually pay attention to it, which is always fun.
It sounds lovely. I think we should do a house swap at some point, Quinn. It sounds idyllic.
Yeah.
I mean, you won't be saying that if you saw kind of how much work there is at the moment.
Yeah. What were you saying about the house renovations?
Yeah, there's no floors, there's no walls, there's no really anything. We're waiting on plasterers and plumbers and builders and all kinds of bits and pieces. We've got a boiler going in a couple of days' time.
This is where you hail from anyway?
Originally, yes. I mean, I'm kind of a bit from everywhere. My parents are both from Essex, so obviously I'm from Norfolk just for the fact of it just so happened to be where I was born at the time. Obviously spent a lot of my life kind of between Essex, Norfolk, Suffolk, London, places like that. And then obviously my parents kind of settled down in West Norfolk, and then obviously slowly made my way across until I moved away when I was about 18 years old, and then haven't been back to Norfolk until about 4 years ago when lockdown struck.
So tell us about the computing side. When did you first get into social media?
So, I mean, social media was a slow developed interest. I started out when I was a kid. Basically, my dad, he brought a computer home that basically his company he worked for, he used to work for a television studio, and he was their accountant, and they were basically throwing out computers into basically a wheelie bin. And he said, look, I've got a young kid who I quite like to kind of getting used to computers, and obviously these things are going to be becoming more and more part of everyday life. So he basically said, could I have it? So they took the hard drive out, and he had to go buy a blank one and obviously reinstall Windows onto it. But he came home with this huge, like, cathode ray kind of monitor thing, and a like white computer, floppy disk drives, all that kind of stuff. And basically sat in front of me, I think I was about 3 at the time, and said, have at it. And obviously I quickly learned how to install games onto it, just like little kind of like flash game, or the equivalent of like what would now be a flash game, playing kind of silly little like point and click games, obviously, ABCs, all that kind of stuff at like 3, trying to like learn how to do it. And
Was
then
it
obviously as I got
the
older,
tennis game with the
oh yeah, Pong, we had that. He basically then would kind of update that every couple of years with a new one, when essentially like his work was throwing computers out again. They'd be like, does your son want this? And he'd be like, yeah, go for it. So then I get like an updated one. And I think I was on Windows 95 for a few years, and then Windows 98. And then obviously I started kind of getting a little bit more kind of savvy with it when I was about 6 or 7, and I was starting to like fix it myself, and like knowing how to kind of like deal with all the bits and pieces, when my granddad basically turned around and went, this is bizarre. He seems to have quite a grasp over this, and he's only like 6 or 7. And then from there they basically kept putting technology in front of me, kept kind of pushing that element of it, because obviously it was something I was clearly had a bit of a flair for. And my granddad, being obviously the man that he was, obviously anytime his grandkids would have kind of an interest in something, he would put 100% behind it, and just try and kind of push you to the point where either you're not interested in it anymore, or it becomes something bigger. And obviously from there, anytime I needed software, anytime I needed something like, because I used to code video games and stuff when I was about 12 or 13, he'd go and buy the license for it and just make sure that I had the license for the software so I could do that. Obviously all word processors. And then he would also then kind of root me out of my parents' house every time there was something wrong with his computer. And it got to a point where there wasn't really many things that I couldn't do on it. And then it was just then getting educated in it formally, so I could go to university and actually have the right kind of
Did you
diplomas
teach
and stuff.
the university course, or was there still stuff that they could teach you nonetheless?
I did first 2 years. It's quite funny. I did first 2 years obviously learning and doing all that, and then in my 3rd year I actually took modules. So I was teaching. I did a module where I was teaching in a high school, and I did a module where I was also teaching primary school students how to code. So I did 2 teaching modules while I was there, but then decided that I absolutely hated teaching in a classroom, and decided I didn't want to do that, because I couldn't get over the fact that I had a set amount that I wanted to teach them at a certain time, and because of the few, it was impacting the many, and I found that used to really frustrate me, and so therefore I didn't pursue that much longer.
Those slow students at the back.
No, but it wasn't the slow
Yeah.
ones. It was the disruptive ones that were the
Ah,
ones that really, because I felt like these kids that really wanted to know it
mm,
were being impacted by these kids that just didn't care. And I'm like, but because that frustrated me so much, I was like, I couldn't do this on a day to day, because I'd always feel like we're not going at the speed that these students want to go at. And because obviously, so I thought, I'm not a teacher.
I ask this from it's a loaded question because of my background, but because of what you were doing when you were at school and when you were so young, were you bullied for this?
Not really. The school that I went to, the interesting kind of thing is because the school that I went to was one where you basically had to have an entrance exam to get in. So obviously there was a lot of kind of smart kids at the school, and there's obviously a lot of sporty kids as well. But the kids that had a lot more kind of like the typically nerdy kind of interests kind of outnumbered the ones that didn't. So that obviously,
So you did the bullying.
well, no, but no. But the point is more, there wasn't really an opportunity for us to be bullied for that, because there were so many of us who had that kind of same kind of very specific interests that obviously it was very difficult to be like, you like computers, because it's like, yeah, but he likes trains, he likes computers, he, plays chess for a national level, he does it. And it's like, because we kind of formed this group of essentially people that typically, yeah, if you were that one person in the school who played chess at a national level, or collected Pokemon cards, or that, obviously those people would be like, "Oh, you're a nerd," and they'd get bullied. But because there were so many of us, we kind of banded together, and then obviously it made quite a lot more of a supportive friendship group I had, because I had a friend that was completely obsessed with like veterinary procedures, and he ended up becoming a vet and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, because none of us were like ha 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 kind of thing, and we were like, oh yeah, what did you get up to this weekend? It was more supportive than that, which means a lot of the people in my kind of friendship group has gone on to do the stuff that they were interested in high school.
Ian, what was your link? Where were you?
Well, I had a similar kind of background a good bit earlier. So where he's talking about cathode ray tubes, they were new. when I was a kid, they were new, and I would be going home and having my garden shed and be fixing televisions and this kind of thing, and fixing radios when I was 10, 11, 12. And there was a period of time, because I was quite nerdy, that I was getting bullied, because our school was a good school, but it was a very mixed school, and the vast majority of kids were not nerdy, and so they would sort of pick on people who were unusual. Now, it didn't tend to last very long, because I grew to be quite quickly one of the larger guys in school, and so they got their backsides kicked if they bullied me. But you could see that there were a lot of kids who wanted to do stuff and were stopped from doing it because of the peer pressure from the others in the school. So it sounds like, Quinn, you had a wonderful school to go to. I think that's great.
Yeah, and I don't feel like it was... I feel like it was kind of quite lucky with the year group that I was in, because I know that obviously, like, the younger year groups, there was not necessarily the same kind of split. So I think I was just very lucky with the stage in which I went to that school. I think if I was like a year younger or a couple of years older, I'd have had a lot more issues. But I think it just happened to kind of be my age group that went through at that time seemed to just be a lot more kind of within those bounds, which was quite nice. Yeah. And it seems to have been kind of that same way throughout. I mean, obviously college, university, all of those kind of, obviously you find more people are more specifically inclined to be within your niche, but obviously because you're applying to be within that niche while you're there, you also find there is still that split across every stage of education, really. It's just obviously some people are in it because they know there's money at the end of it. Some people are in it because it's more of an interest. For me, it was never like, oh, I can get millions of pounds. It was, for me, it was, I want to take this to a master's level. I want to know as much as I possibly can. And it was only when I got to the end of the master's and went, do I want to do a PhD? And then realised that I had to teach during the PhD, that I went, nah, no thanks.
Learn on the job. I think also nowadays, because technology is so ubiquitous, the norm is, computers, IT, tech. I get the impression that kids nowadays, it's just completely normal. There's no the so-called nerdy ones or whatever are just normal now. There's no kind of, it's not like the jocks or the cool ones, or everyone has to get their head around it now, don't they?
Yeah, and I feel like obviously the difference is still, though, that there's the people that know that they just use it. Like, I've got friends who've got phones, I've got friends who've got kids that have got phones, but they don't really know how to use them. And I think there's still a split in the sense of, like, there'll be the kid that will take the phone apart to fix it and will know exactly how it works and will build his own and play with computers and have it all, pull apart the computer across the garage and like try and figure out how it works. But then there'll also be the ones that just go, oh, look, phone, snap.
Yeah.
Or, pick it up,
you know what?
However you want to do it.
I'm definitely not an IT expert at all by any means, but Quinn, you would have been very proud of me. Twice now I've fixed my Mac.
Oh yeah?
Largely just because I'm mean and I don't want to give it to someone else to fix. Nice. But I've changed the battery in it and changed the charging point as well. Which, because of the fiddly way they're put together, means taking apart a whole load of other stuff first, doing that tiny little thing, and then getting it all back together, and it all seems to be working okay. So
that's brilliant. And I'm all for that. I mean, obviously,
well done.
Yeah.
I'm impressed with the charging point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And the thing is, as well,
That
is
was
obviously
good.
for a lot of people, they would have just gone, well, time for a new Mac, and then your one would have ended up in some landfill somewhere or in a cupboard collecting dust to a point where it then doesn't work anymore because it's not been turned on for a certain amount of time, and then landfilled. And it's like, I think for me, kind of one of my biggest things is I hate the idea of waste and rubbish and stuff like that. So as a kid, I was always fixing stuff. I mean, my computer is somewhere there, and it's made up of like old computers and all different components and parts and stuff like that that I don't want to throw away, because
And there's only a
at the end of the day,
certain amount of the raw materials, right?
exactly, yeah. I mean, I think there was a silicon shortage. I don't know whether or not I'm 100% on this, but there was a silicon shortage which then caused the price of graphics cards to go completely through the roof at one point, and I think they just haven't come
There was
down
a
since
factory
then.
fire in Taiwan that did that too. All the silicon discs were being produced by a particular factory in Taiwan that caught fire, and so for about 4 or 5 months, people were running out of chips. They couldn't get chips for their
That's the
computers.
one.
I'm just thinking of our dear listener wondering what has this got to do with we're going to make a $50 million movie. The relevance here is that every team needs a Quinn. Every successful team trying to do anything, especially what we're trying to do, it's entirely reliant on Quinn to put all this stuff together and get it out there.
No pressure.
And yeah, you just underpin everything that we do. And for those that want to do something along the lines of what we're doing or any other significant project, you need a Quinn, and you can't have this one because we've got it. I want to not particularly move us on, but how did you get to Japan, and how long were you there?
I was doing my degree and I met a girl, and she had kind of perfected a route through university of taking modules that enabled her to basically submit all the work and do all of the coursework and attend all the lectures basically digitally. And in doing that, she basically attended maybe 2 or 3 lectures a year, and she'd spend the rest of the time connected to the internet in whatever country that she had decided she wanted to spend the time in. So instead of basically spending her money on, the student loan that she was given, on, rent, student halls, any of that, she would spend that on traveling, hotels, and all bits and pieces like that. And she would obviously pick really far away countries. She'd then get Avios points that would then obviously pay for the next flights and all that kind of stuff. And I think I saw her maybe 3 times in the first year of a degree, maybe twice in the second year of a degree, and I don't think I saw her at all in the third year of a degree. But she passed every year. And I think once I got to a third year and I kind of got through a load of the modules that I realised I needed to be in the building for, I then started realising, well, actually, I could do this module on the plane. So then I booked a holiday and I went somewhere, and I was sat in the airport terminal, tapping away, getting my coursework done. Obviously, then I'd be off at some hotel and I'd do my next bit of coursework, then I'd go off for a swim, and then and I did that quite a lot. And kind of I picked my modules, and then I'm essentially my final year, I just did every single module, didn't have an exam, didn't have any kind of in-person events or anything at all. So I kind of got on a plane and I flew over to Japan. I'd always wanted to go. And basically I kind of went, had a wonderful week, completed my coursework where it needed to be done, and came back and thought, why am I in the UK? Like, I could be doing whatever. And at the point where, because I didn't go to my graduation, I graduated online. Basically, they sent me all my information. They sent me my certificate and all that kind of stuff. And I spent the money that I would have spent on, a graduation gown and all that kind of stuff in a restaurant over in Japan. And I basically just kind of moved over there, and it was that kind of suddenly realizing that I don't have to go through like a rigmarole to do it. And it was just that girl going like, well, do you realize I haven't been to a lecture in like 6 months? But I went, oh, I can. And then I just started like building it until eventually I just didn't come back. And obviously I then was working out there. I worked for a couple of companies just doing, well, to start with it was data entry, and then kind of moved up to doing a bit of contract coding, where obviously like a company would like hire me for 3 months to make this bit of software with about 10 other people, and then that would be done, and I'd be like, thanks for the money, and then I would spend it for the next few months, and then like I'd
And were
move
you
somewhere
learning
else.
Japanese?
Yeah, I was learning Japanese. I speak it quite well, or I spoke it quite well. I'm quite rusty after about 4 or 5 years of not speaking it, but I got around all right. There were only a few occasions which I had severe problems, and they're typically when asking for directions. For some reason, I'm completely incompetent when it comes to someone giving me directions in a foreign language. It's just like I just end up completely turned around. But yeah, so I was there for just under 2 years in total, and then I moved to China for, I'd say, about 2 months, maybe 3 months, and then for work I then moved to South Korea, where I was there for about 6 months. Really struggled with the language. I can read it, I can't speak it, and thought I'm not getting on here as much as I was hoping I would. It's not as like Japan as everyone was saying it was, and just didn't enjoy it as much. So then I moved back to China until kind of lockdown was kind of on the horizon, and all the time having been visiting other countries around, because the same way that you can jump on a plane from the UK for 100 quid to go to Poland or France or wherever, I was doing the same thing over there. So I was like basically getting to a weekend and going, okay, well, I can spend, you know, the equivalent of about 50-60 pounds and I'll quickly fly over to Indonesia, or just generally kind of like go and spend a few days in another country just experiencing it. And then obviously
Brilliant.
My family started sending me messages going like, have you heard of this COVID thing? And I'm going, no, I haven't heard it at all. And they're going, you know, there's like a virus coming from China. And I was a bit clueless about it, and I'm looking online, can't really find anything, and there was like nothing about it to start with. And
when are you talking about?
So I was in China at the start of coronavirus, and
so that's November 2019.
Correct. And basically I had no idea it was going on, because there was nothing in our kind of media over there at the time saying about it. And it was only when enough people started kind of communicating across. So my mum was sending me like articles basically saying, you know, this is what's going on. But I was like, oh God. And then it was only when it started getting to a point where like we really were having kind of, you know, they had to tell us.
Where were you? Where in China were you?
Shenzhen.
Okay.
So obviously,
Shenzhen's
on that bit. So it's
on the east.
Yes.
Sort of southeast part of China.
Yes.
The virus started in
Wuhan.
Wuhan. Yeah. So, which is a good bit further west.
Yes.
And it had been going for weeks by this point, and you knew nothing about it.
Nothing at all. And then all of a sudden, it was like the floodgate broke a little bit, and then obviously cities were closing down, and it was like, wear your masks, don't go out, you know. And it was all of a sudden just like, it went from them basically saying they knew nothing about it to, or at least where I was, to just absolute pandemonium. And I just thought, I can't be here for this. Came back to the UK. I immediately moved back actually into a friend's house, because they had all my stuff, because obviously they like kept a load of stuff up in their loft. And I thought, okay, well, I can stay here for a couple of days. And then, what was it, 26th of March, I think it was, we had our lockdown announced. And It was the 27th of March, then I kind of went, I don't know how long this is going to last. I probably need to make sure I'm at mum's for lockdown, rather than being stuck with my friend and his wife, who, you know, are kind of new couple, well, newly married, don't really want to have their friend who they haven't properly seen in 4 years just like living in their bedroom. And I basically said to mum, you know, is the offer still available? And she went, absolutely, not a problem, come back. So we were driving down. I mean, we were driving through like police roadblocks and everything, thinking they're going to stop us, they're going to stop us. Nothing at all. And then stuck in place for 2 years while we all inevitably locked down.
Wow. But
So,
meanwhile, you were able to happily carry on online because it was home from home.
Yeah, and I started like an alternative business as well. I have always had a bit of a passion for upcycling and recycling and things like that. So during lockdown, I was also I ran a furniture upcycling business, which was great and it did all right. Just because it was one of those things where I needed to be doing something and I was bored. And obviously, there's only so long stands being sat in front of a computer doing absolutely nothing else. And obviously, they were saying, you can't leave the house for more than like twice a day. You can do your one walk a day, but that just doesn't work for me. I go a bit stir crazy if I'm not doing something.
You're not as much of a nerd as I am. If someone told me I had to stay in front of my computer for 24 hours a day, I'd be okay. That's fine.
Yeah, but like I spent a lot of it just basically anytime I was allowed out of the house, I was like picking up bits of furniture from people. Like I was like, leave it outside the front of your house, I'll pick it up, and I just would put it in the car and then come back, paint it, sort it all out, and then at the stage where you could then start delivering stuff and bits and pieces, or I'd basically hire people that were delivery men who would just then take it to the location and done. And I did that for a couple of years during lockdown while also building everyone's websites, because every single person and their dog through lockdown decided they wanted to start a business, get a dog, or build a website. It was like, and sometimes all three. So
and make sourdough.
Oh yeah, everyone made sourdough and painted big rainbows and put them in their windows.
To find out more about the book, visit tjswar.com, and to buy it, click on the Amazon link below. To accompany us on our journey, please subscribe to this podcast because we're going to make a $50 million movie.